Alright, good evening, y'all. Mukbang Jules here, Drink Jules here, Cocktail Jules, Whiskey Neat Jules. I have some nice Macallan 12, courtesy of one of my friends, my local friends in the area. Thank you. You know who you are, who rides motorcycles if you're watching this video. Um, but yeah, I thought I might do a mukbang today, a little less discursive than kind of my usual um, or my past two mukbangs, where I didn't really kind of go in with a set script. I've been thinking a lot lately, I think in a more structured way, of things that I learned in my 20s after school. Um, Most of them, I think, probably my parents have harped on in some way, or some of them, at least some of them, not all of them. But you don't really internalize a lot of these things until you kind of go make your own mistakes. Sometimes you don't always have to make mistakes. Um, but yeah, just kind of doing life, and you learn from doing life what not to do and what to do sometimes. But yeah, I just wanted to talk through a few life lessons I learned in my 20s. That being said, my experiences, as a middle class, basically American kid, pretty stable family life. I haven't had a crazy amount of hardship growing up. Like honestly, a pretty happy and privileged life or childhood growing up, and so. But that's not to say there weren't struggles that I faced throughout my 20s. There are still struggles I face today, um, as a guy entering his 30s now. But now that I've turned 30 this year, there are, I think, 10 key life lessons that I've taken away. My goal of this video is, if there's anyone younger than, let's say, 30 watching, I have a lot of older viewers or folks who are just at my age, that this will provide some benefit. Like I said, everyone's life circumstance is different. Maybe this is applicable to you, maybe it's not, but I hope it's helpful, and this is kind of what I found useful for myself. So let's start out with some life lessons. Life lesson number one, know yourself. Um, I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. Knowing yourself is important because in order to work towards something, right, you have to know, what you want. And if you want to accomplish a vision or a goal as a person, there's going to be certain natural strengths and weaknesses that you have as a person. And being able to know what you're strong and weak at is really important because you can determine, is the vision, maybe not, I wouldn't necessarily wholesale eliminate most possibilities in life, but within reason. Like, if I'm not in like a D1 basketball program in college, right, and I want to join the NBA, it's probably going to be very low likelihood that's going to happen. So yeah, maybe athletic prowess is not my strength. So you're not going to be in the NBA. Maybe that's a weakness. But maybe let's say you're good at math, or maybe you're good at problem solving. I think knowing your strengths early on will allow you to, sanity check if the vision that you're seeking for yourself is attainable, or if it's not. If it is attainable, like how easy will it be to attain that, considering your natural gifts and talents and what you're able to cultivate from your base. And so knowing yourself is important to be able to reach your goals. So may ask, okay, Jules, what if I don't know what I really want for myself? And so I think that's kind of the first thing you need to figure out, because I think when you're young, you have the advantage of time on your side. I think when you enter the workforce, people are a lot more forgiving if you're young and you make mistakes. And so being able to take advantage of the time you have when you're young is super important, to just get to know yourself, what you like, what you want out of life. Like if you want to get married, if you want to date, like just make sure you know what you want, know what's going to get in the way of that possibly, or what's going to help you along the way. And so that's really important, to really know yourself. I think just from the pure goal perspective. And so let's say you figured out And this is a process throughout your 20s. You're not going to completely know yourself. I think there's lots of pieces you kind of learn as you age and you go through life, but you'll come to a critical point where you kind of know things that will make you unhappy, things that will upset you, things that will make you, on the other hand, like very happy, or what you really want out of life in terms of goals. But and those change throughout seasons of life. But it's important to know, right now what you want, who you are, and if there's anything in the way that's going to get to your goal. Um, and so to the next point is, okay, let's say you figured out at least some reasonable sense of who you are, your desires, your weaknesses, your strengths, and you have a vision of your life. Like, let's say I want to become a film director in Hollywood or something like that, or I want to write software for a big tech company, or I want to write the next breakthrough in AI and join OpenAI or DeepMind or something like that. I think the important part is you work backwards from a vision, and always what I mean by this is you have the end in mind, but from that end in mind, make incremental milestones backwards that will get you eventually to your vision. And you should work backwards from the end to the point where you are now. And I think that's important because it really envisions you, it makes you do the thought exercise of where you're going to be in maybe 10 years, 5 years from now. If I'm perfectly honest with that, that's still something that I'm working on right now. I think I had a vision in college of where I wanted to be career wise. I've mostly hit that goal. I think I'm just going along with the career ladder right now from where I'm at kind of in life. But yeah, I had this vision when I was in college. And yeah, like I think it's something that you'll work on as you reach different phases in your life. But it's important to know what the end is in mind and to work backwards from that. Like create sub milestones from every point where you are now to that point. And let's say something doesn't work out, right? That's where you'll naturally adjust. Like don't be too level set and kind of you can have a vision, but be flexible too to how that vision is implemented too. Like you have milestones, maybe working backwards, but maybe there's going to be some roadblocks or some you're going to get sidetracked along the way, and that's where kind of it benefits to think of multiple scenarios where you may fail and where you can get back on track. I think that's very useful, but adaptability is also kind of a key thing too. I think the third thing is, once you have your vision, once you know your sub milestones you need to reach to meet that vision, you need to work hard. Like it, it goes without saying that hard work is one of those things that, you know, when everyone's out having fun in college or, I don't know, high school, things of that sort, you're in on a Friday night and you're studying. Um, yeah, like you're gonna have to sometimes make sacrifices, and depending on how naturally smart you are, I know some people are really smart. They can party a lot, or they partied a lot in college. They did just fine. Really sharp kids. I was honestly not that guy. Like I think I'm smart enough to do well in a lot of my classes, but I'm not like I don't naturally get it all of the time, and so for the I think throughout my career and throughout my life, honestly, if I do like a hard assessment of myself, I think what I make up for in the lack of natural quickness at times, I compensate in terms of hard work. And I've I struggled with this a lot in college. Like you're surrounded by some of the smartest people you'll ever meet in university. I was in an honors program at back at UT in Texas, UT Austin back in Texas. I have some wicked smart kids in my CS classes, my computer science classes, even more smarter people in my master's classes. I think there were times, right, that I felt like completely outgunned, completely outclassed by my peers. like my answer to that is don't really let that get to you. I think people underestimate the effect of hard work over just natural ability, and more times than not, you'll be surprised. The hard work is what's going to get you over the line. I think for one thing, right? One anecdote that I have from master's program is this. So I remember I was struggling kind of in interviews um, for full time just after my first year of masters, and I was having a really hard time, and I was talking to one of my peers, one of my friends in my cohort for my master's program, and he was saying, what's been your study regime for interviews? And he literally told me he did every Leet Code problem. So Leet Code is basically an online interview platform for those of you who aren't familiar with the tech world. It's almost like studying for your SATs or your LSAT. Basically, they have a bunch of coding questions. I think at the time there probably were around like 300 questions on the question bank. Now they're in the thousands because of the proliferation of these online platforms. And, interviewers are getting smart, tweaking the questions, changing the questions so they can't be memorized. This guy literally did every Leet Code problem 3 times. And so when you say that, oh, I'm not naturally smart, oh, I'm completely outclassed, you might be just getting outclassed by the guy who's literally doing Leet Code 3 times. Like, work hard. That's my takeaway. Like, don't underestimate the effect that hard work has on the end result. And even if you aren't the smartest guy or gal in the room, your work ethic will go a long way. And so, words of encouragement for anyone who's struggling in college right now. Maybe you're struggling to look for a new full-time job. Hard work is key. To that end, how do you work hard? I think in order to work hard, you need to be consistent. And what I mean is consistency always trumps feeling. I think this goes for most things. If you want to get better in life, if you want to get better at guitar, at piano, you practice, right? You keep practicing. Even if it hurts your fingers, your calluses are still building, you practice. You keep screwing up the last movement in your piano piece, keep practicing, right? And like be attentive to now be you need to work smart about it too. Like be consistent in your practice, but also be attuned to where you're failing. Maybe you should step back and analyze where do you screw up, and that's again going back to knowing yourself. But most of the time, like more than just acknowledging where you mess up, you need to practice, and then that goes with interview prep, that goes with school, things like that. Consistency over feeling always matters. I think, especially for fitness. Like fitness is the prime example. Maybe you're not an academic type, but like you want to get strong. Maybe you want to get swole. You're bulking in college, like every other 18-year-old scrawny kid who goes into undergrad, like wanting to get college gains. Consistency trumps feeling every time. Like your feelings are fickle. What sets you apart really is how willing you are to dedicate yourself to a thing or something. And I think, a lot of that can be said too about relationships too, like being able to show up and being there for people who matter in your life, your parents, your loved ones, your close friends. A lot of times you may not want to get out of bed or like hang out, or like you may not want to be there for the person, or like let's say you get into a fight with your spouse, right? You don't want to be nice or loving, or you don't want to um, do the thing that you should do as a spouse. Like maybe, yeah, like I think at times, right, it's more so you do the thing and then you feel the feeling later, rather than you feel the feeling and then you do the thing. And that's, if you rely on your feelings solely on whether you're going to do something or not, like that's a complete recipe for disaster in your life. So always be consistent. Consistency is key over feelings. I think next is kind of just general, like everyone will tell you this, but really, be kind be honest, and be firm. And that's an interesting combination, right? Like kindness and honesty, I think is, that's for granted, right? Like you should always try to be kind to other people. Everyone is going through their own struggles. It doesn't really cost you anything. And maybe not that framing's not always fair too. I wouldn't say think of it in terms of a cost. It's not like a selfish thing. Like it doesn't really cost you anything to be kind. I think that's kind of a negative perspective to look at things. But you know, you're dealing with other people who are, maybe you don't believe in God, but for me, the people you deal with are created in the image and likeness of God, and there is an element of God in each of the person. Of course, those people are not God, but in my mind, in my faith tradition. But because of that, you should treat other people with kindness and respect. Always be honest in your dealings with other people. I think honesty goes a long way, makes things smoother between people. Maybe it doesn't always make things smoother between people, but it's better to be able to stick to your word. And when you make a promise, make promises you can keep rather than break them. Right? I think that's kind of what really builds bonds of trust between friends and family. And yeah, just be honest and kind. I think the third one, be firm. Like I think don't be a pushover is kind of the thing. Like you can be kind and honest to people, but you should be careful. And from when you first meet someone, always be kind and honest to them. But if people take advantage of you, if people are not nice to you, treat you uncharitably, like you should still protect yourself. Um, and you should, yeah, like draw boundaries and don't let people take advantage of you, of you, of your kindness and your honesty. And so that's what I mean by being firm. I think firmness and honoring your values too. Like if maybe you're maybe you're entering into a relationship with another person, they're pressuring you to do things that are against what you believe in, or you feel like you are compromising compromising some things in a relationship just to please the other person, but it doesn't really sit well with you. Don't do that. Like it's bad to live in contradiction with yourself. Um, it usually doesn't end well. It's kind of from my life experience. And so just be firm in be firm in what you want, what you believe in, and firm when people try to take it, like people show demonstrated pattern of behavior. If they're going to take advantage of you, don't let that happen. That's meant to protect you and to ensure your well-being, and not being selfish by any means. You're just looking out for your interests, for the better, not in a selfish way. I think that's the fifth thing. Sixth thing is to fail fast. And this is always thrown around a lot in the tech world. Like failing fast is key. I think it's kind of a trite phase now, and it's been overused throughout the last decade. But failing fast is really important, especially in your 20s, because one, you don't want to get locked into a career, a life situation, a relationship, whatever have you, and you put in a lot of effort into a thing and it fails, but if you knew it's better to fail earlier than later, because then you can pivot in the ideal sense to the thing that is better suited for you, be it a person, be it a relationship, be it a field of study, be it a career. Now, I'm not saying that you should seek out failure. That's one thing. And it's one thing it's one thing to intentionally seek out failure. I'm not saying that. It's never great to fail, but the failures you have, they should be informative, and you should try to get to failure quickly. I think one of the things is, like, let's say for relationships, for example, right? I think now when I date, like I always try to bring up big things earlier on. Like I think, maybe 2 dates in, 3 dates in, just talk about kind of values, where you are at life, lifestyle, things of that sort. It doesn't have to be like an interrogation, right? But it's important, like compared to what I did when I was in my earlier 20s, like things would drag on, and you finally come to the question you wanted to ask, and you find that there's a fundamental incompatibility. What you essentially did is you've kind of wasted your time in a way when you could have just asked the question earlier on. The same thing is, I think, with your career and your passion, your field of study. Um, it's better to figure out, it's better to fail your entry level classes, right? Like in engineering or whatever have you early, than to get to your maybe your capstone course or one of your final upper division credits, and then you've wasted kind of all of your time in some sense. And so it saves you a lot of time. Time is of the essence. You have a limited time on Earth, and so that's why it's kind of important really to fail fast. Just because your time is limited and valuable, you shouldn't waste it putting it into things that are not going to work out for you. Now, it's really hard to say if things are going to work out ahead of time. Like maybe you did well in your entry level and then you fail later down the line in college. Now, you can't really control for that. But that being said, relationships maybe a different story, right? Like it's easier to get the big questions out of the way earlier than later. And if the big questions aren't met, right, early on in the relationship, you're doing yourself and the other person a favors. You can find someone who suits your and fits your values, and they can find someone more suitable as well. Um, that's the sixth thing. Seventh thing: things don't always get better, but they get different, and so you should adjust. Right? I think a lot of the fallacies in life is one of the. I think one of the great fallacies in life is things will always get better. Like oftentimes it's not always the case. Like you could go through a catastrophe and your life can be completely changed forever. Like I go out drinking, I decide not to heed caution, I drive home, I crash my car, hurting myself, potentially harming another person, going to jail. Things don't always get better, but they do. That was a really morbid example, but like for the things you can control, right? Of course, you should try to act prudently. I think that's again being. I I I mean, prudence kind of goes through all of this, right? Like runs the vein through all of this. So don't drink and drive is kind of one thing, but you know things are going to happen in your life that are not great. You might go through a pretty traumatic breakup. You might not get what you wanted in terms of you're getting into the school you wanted. That was a big thing for me when I was in high school. I was so obsessed about getting into like an elite college. That obviously didn't happen. Um, Now they don't always get better. Like it's really hard to say what my life would have been if I went to X, Y, and Z school. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to say, right? Like, I don't know. What if I dated my high school girlfriend through college, right? Would it be better? It's really really hard to say. Um, and so I think what I mean by things don't always get better is you don't really know if it would have been better or worse, but things are just going to change, and so you should just adjust, right? Early on in my college career, I was struggling in some of my entry level CS courses at the beginning when I started computer science in college, and yeah, like I didn't do well. I had a decision to make there, um, and yeah, like I adjusted. I ended up you know, taking a taking a class again because I didn't do so well, and that's been fine for me throughout my career. I've been able to get stuff done, learn stuff, be a high contributing engineer, and I hope hopefully a high contributing engineer and hopefully a high contributing manager now at my current company. But yeah, like you adjust, like you have roadblocks and failures. You got to around those, get back on your feet, and it'll be okay. I think the what I'm also aiming at here is, you shouldn't be passive about things. Like the assumption that things will always get better is that, life is just going to come to you, and naturally great things are going to happen, right? You're going to meet the woman of your dreams. You're going to get the job you always wanted. You're going to, grow in your spiritual life. Like these things take work and adjustment. And this goes back to working hard, but this also goes back to adjustment. Like you're on one track, you get derailed. You might not be able to go back to that original track, but you can always, change your path and work with the conditions you have. Adaptability is really kind of the key thing. Like if you're not adaptable, you're going to have a hard time. And I think that applies for most jobs, most relationships, especially the world we live in right now. It's super dynamic. You got to adjust. And so that's what I mean. Things don't always get better, they get different. So therefore, you should adjust. That's the seventh thing. I think the eighth thing is you should invest in life-giving relationships. What do I mean by life-giving relationships? Well, this is, I think, one of the things where, for me, I think it depends on your personality. I'm pretty introverted, and so, and at least what I've read, I don't know if it has any merit whatsoever, but at least in my personal life, I feel much better hanging out with a few close friends on a consistent basis than maybe just going with large groups of people here and there. You do this in college, and you're going to find yourself in situations like that in college and young adulthood. But there's maybe a handful of people in your life that you're really going to be close to and talk to. Invest in those relationships up front. I think that's one thing I wish I had done when I was in college more is, spend more time, quality time with my friends, spend more time with my parents, spend more time kind of with, in those relationships that really are life-giving. And I think, it's one thing in college, right, to go to a party and meet new people, but to do that every weekend, at least for me, it's just like, it's kind of exhausting. You don't really, develop anything deeper or longer lasting. I found that way, and it's more important to focus. I think it's better to have a few good friends in my mind than have a bunch of shallow friends. I think this is kind of like a truism at this point. I think most people know this, but oftentimes I think in college you kind of get caught up in the scene of trying to consistently meet new people, looking for novelty and things of that sort. And usually at the end of the day, that those novelties are fleeting, things of that sort. Like if you're always seeking out new people and not focusing on going deeper with other people, you're not really going to develop a close and lasting relationship. Is kind of what I've seen, at least in my life. But yeah, invest in life-giving relationships. You know, everything I do in life is relationship driven. I think aside from trying to make money, I think that of course is, a survival point of thing, but outside of the realm of making money and trying to sustain myself, everything else in my life is, I'm very relationship driven, and a lot of my choices are kind of tied to in life are tied to the relationships I have with other people, or at least relationships I envision myself having in the future. And so that's one thing. Invest in life-giving relationships. I think the ninth thing is invest in retirement early. Now this is dependent on your financial situation. I know a lot of folks are not always well off going to school. I had a very privileged, um, relatively privileged upbringing. My parents paid for school. I had some scholarships to cover some, um, and I didn't graduate with any debt. Living expenses were taken care of. I didn't eat out. I didn't live a crazy lavish lifestyle in college, but I ate out at least like once or twice a week, and that adds up a lot. Like kind of, when you enter the working world, you don't realize how much money you spend if you're kind of with you're on the dole of your parents, which I was, and so I lived a pretty privileged life. So this might not always be applicable to your life situation, But if you have a financial position where you have excess income and you don't have familial obligations you need to take care of personally with that money, I would invest in retirement early. You're not going to miss the money when you're young. I mean, you can spend it on stupid things like you turn 21. You can spend it on alcohol. You can spend it on travel. Like travel is good too, but more likely than not, you're not going to miss that much money. Um, like unless you're spending a crazy amount traveling. Like I think that's a different story altogether. And there's some things you can do when you're young that you won't be able to do, or you can do when you're older, but it won't be the same. Now you need to balance that too, but set aside some money for retirement. You're not going to miss it by the time you reach that age. God willing, you reach that age, you're going to have a good sizable chunk of money if you're able to save and invest early. And doing that again, like I said, consistency over feeling. Doing that on a consistent basis. Paying your retirement before you pay yourself every month when you start working is really key for you to build lasting wealth for your retirement, maybe generational wealth for your kids if you're planning on having a family. Invest in retirement early. That's kind of my spiel. I think the 10th life lesson is avoid lifestyle creep. I think one thing that does catch up with you is, especially if you're working in a professional field, is you'll notice your friends are eating out a lot or drinking a lot out, take nice vacations all the time, things of that sort. Everyone's life circumstances are different. If you don't have the means to live that lifestyle, try not to engage in that lifestyle, or else you're going to put yourself in a pretty bad financial situation. It's never come to that point in my life, but I've noticed, at least for me, like in my early 20s, I would spend a lot eating out and like drinking, and it really adds up a lot. Like now, I'm very tight on my budget, or not. I'm not tight on my budget, but I'm very disciplined in my budget now. Now that I have a house and a mortgage that's taking up a large amount of expenses, I'm a lot more attuned to kind of my spending these days. But the thing about lifestyle creep is it's sneaky. Like you might not think you're spending that much, but if you like little things add up. Just kind of going out for drinks a couple of days a week, right? That's at least maybe 30-40 bucks, right? If you live in a high cost of living state or city, that 40 bucks a week. Let's say you do that 50 weeks a year. That's like that's 2 grand, right? So like those little habits add up a lot, and so when you avoiding lifestyle creep is really about building a financial fortress for yourself, especially if you're going to have a family in the future. Your spouse may not make as much money as you. You're going to have a kid to support, right? A lot of your paycheck is not going to go towards yourself, and so don't get used to all of the luxuries, right? Or I think what I'm trying to say is it's fine to enjoy the nice things in life, but don't acquire a taste for them. That's where I think your financial state will kind of go downhill very quickly, or at least that's my sense. I haven't been there personally, but I feel like it's very easy to kind of get caught up in it, especially if you work in a professional field like tech. Maybe you're a lawyer, you're a banker, things like that. You get caught up in lifestyle creep. Eventually, you're bringing in a lot of money, but you're spending it faster than it's coming in, and that usually doesn't work out well. And so that's my 10th. Watch out for lifestyle creep. And so, yeah, these are kind of my life lessons to my younger self. I hope you found these a bit useful. This is kind of a long monologue. But yeah, that's it. Mukbang Jules, signing out.